So I think we're supposed to have a recorder, a facilitator, a timekeeper. I don't know where those directions went. Here they are. Facilitator, timekeeper, recorder.
What's the time we have on this, by the way?
We have until four. Adam said
my alarm.
And so we have to do like we've done, I think, in the past where we use these sentence frames here on page 2. The RDI TPA work group recommends that, and this is necessary because, and then implementation is recommendations.
Yeah, I like your idea of sentence frames. That's exactly what they are, aren't they?
They are sentence frames, yeah. But
Where do you find that?
on page 2 of this document, the workshop instruction. And we're looking at the document, we're looking at the short
recommendations A, right?
Yeah, A and
Directions for embedding.
do we have to also get to the next one, 2 brainstorm sets?
that we're just looking
No,
at.
C, we're looking at C, sorry, improve direction to programs for embedding, that's us.
Yep.
And that's on page 12.
That's good. Okay. That's on page 12. And our deliverable is to come up with language for them
To use those sentence frame, and they're very strict, like you gotta use it. Frame.
but that's like at 4 o'clock, we should have a working draft.
We should have a
sentence frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, so. What do you think? How should we jump?
I think maybe we should take just a minute to look at if we haven't yet, look at the chart.
Again.
Direction. To programs for embedding. Hello.
Hello. I didn't know we had so many folks in this.
I'm not.
You're gonna be roving.
So we said we take a second and look at the brainstorm ideas and the rankings and then the charts for our improved direction to programs for embedding. Yeah, that, and then go on to the next page. That's what, if it's, the title should have been on the page about that. Yeah, it's on the bottom. Yeah.
So I'm gonna need a little bit of reading comprehension besides individual reading comprehension, like group reading comprehension, because I don't really understand some of these statements, even though I took box last night. Everyone should read or hear what I don't understand when people are ready, I guess. Are you ready? Did you do your reading?
Yeah, I did. Once I'm ready.
So there are some things in here that I think, I see the rankings and I always assume that means everybody understood that we all agreed what we understood, but I didn't understand something. So for example, the stuff around we tried to figure out this last time when we talked to each other. Are we gonna say like this is A, B, C, D, or do we
I just do it by
this point?
yeah,
just like one.
or like, yeah.
Yeah, so so agreement with this statement was program standards shall be updated to specify the TPA as a formative tool that is embedded in programs and completed by candidates in their coursework. So again, every time I see this word formative tool, formative assessment, I don't even understand like how we could say that given that it's a summative tool.
But that's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix. That's what we're trying
Change
to
the
solve.
language and
Yes.
then make the reality change with it.
Well, if we put this into the programs in the proper way, then it can be, because it was originally supposed to be. But because it's been operationalized at the very end,
Right.
that's been the problem. So what we're saying, or what I think all of them are saying more or less the same thing, is use the system in order to have the assessment act the way it was originally intended to act. So right now, there's nothing in the accreditation process to hold a program accountable for making it formative.
For formative uses.
Truly. So at least that's my interpretation.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And that's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's
So-
my interpretation.
So then I would say, I would have had a lot easier time endorsing that statement, even though I did endorse it, if it had added things like such as, e.g.
Well, see, there's the part, that's the rub.
I'm trying to help us, like, for me, if I was to write to that today and say I want to add something, I would add e.g.
Yeah,
And then e.g. would be processes, cycles, and protocols.
right.
In other words, I would have more than the word formative tool, because I don't know what that really means, except some statement about more than that.
Right, and so then we kind of get into the how. So how do you make it formative? Because, exactly, so, and I guess when I see somebody say explicit, I'm assuming that they are talking about specificity in language that will tell us how to ensure that it is formative.
So-
That's my assumption.
I was trying to be positive and say, I think that's how I would get there with you. I would say, yeah, that's a great starting point, but I need more to write a recommendation because it's really general. That was it. I think that's the other ones. I'm listening in on what other people are thinking.
I mean, I guess my question in this process, like we're making a recommendation, but
Mhm.
in terms of getting into the real nitty gritty of the how and the language that would be in that, I'm not so sure that they intended for us to do that. I think that's the next level.
Yes, I agree. That's my understanding.
That's what I'm thinking.
We're just making the recommendations and then there's gonna be.
Somebody else doing this
Or maybe.
for us too.
Some of us.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but see, that's exactly where I want to stop and say, I'm not going to be here to rubber stamp something where somebody has a vague open door to write whatever they want and then comes away without any clarity about what they mean. In other words, this word has been overused and misused again and again. It's window dressing. It's very oftentimes thrown out as a way to try and justify the summative exam. And I think that's wrong. So I think what we need to, it's also intellectually dishonest and it's also not research-based. There's a lot of ways to say it's wrong. So to make it more positive for this group, I think we can guide a little bit. When we say formative tool, we don't just leave it like that and walk away. We say, we mean processes, protocols, ways that we could measure and evaluate your implementation.
Right here?
That's number one.
When you develop whatever it is that you're gonna do.
Oh, that's right.
theoretical framework and blah, blah, blah,
You said that what's missing.
You'll be able to articulate those items there.
Explain what we mean by that. Because you're right, saying formative, it could be interpreted many different ways by many different people.
But it has been.
Well, it has true.
Radically misused.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, we can absolutely give them some ideas of what we mean by that.
Can we combine the first two together to kind of make your idea around what is embedded? The word explicitly is also shows up.
Yeah,
I do.
I put all three of them in there, at least,
Yeah.
I kind of grouped that one. For those three.
The degree to which preparation programs chosen TPA is supported and embedded in coursework and clinical work will be measured and reported in the accreditation process.
And I would have added to that same exact line and monitored. But it's one thing to say it's measured, it's another thing to say it's reported, but it's another thing to say, and it's being monitored. We're looking at its
And
implementation
then if
over
we take
time.
it a step further, what action or an outcome based on the thing.
Well, there could be that.
Right.
That's the most important part.
Right.
Is, common standard for continuous improvement.
Expect it out.
How are they using that data to make decisions and refine the program?
Yes.
Now, the one thing that's also highly, again, just like so taken for granted, you almost want to scream if you haven't done this work. I've done clinical work, but I've been in that room with that teacher and that mentor teacher. I hate to say it, semester after semester after semester, I've watched the variability in placement. I've seen the variability in mentoring and cooperating teacher. I've seen the variability in the curriculum, its depth, ambition. One of the challenges I had with that one was clinical work. We're assuming by statute, right, that we know what that means. But a lot of programs, I think, if they're going to be measured, reported, monitored, right? Like what aspect of that clinical work? Can we give any more guidance what we mean? Do we mean like phase 1, 2? Do we mean cycle 1, 2?
Well, so I guess what I would say to that, because, this is
Yeah.
a problem and has been a problem for a long time in terms of equitable placements
Mhm.
and how those placements work and the level of collaboration between districts, because you do have some situations where school districts dictate to the institution
Who they're gonna do.
who we're taking and where we're putting
Your
them.
mentor and cooperating teachers are for the TPA.
So, and then you have on the flip side, programs who have some latitude in being able to say, hey, I'm going to work with the school district and hey, I've got a candidate here and where do you think a good place, so there are so many variations of how people can get this done. Because I want to say it was Long Beach Unified that says where their candidates go. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then again, so the program
Right.
is subject to that. So then what I would say to that, Brent, I guess, I would just say that you're right in terms of making sure that that standard or whatever we say in there describes how that relationship has to look. So regardless of who is driving the train on where this candidate is placed, everybody's on the same page with the standard and with the expectation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's all I can think of. I don't even know.
There was some other part of this documentation, I maybe get to remember where, this idea that the mentor teacher has been onboarded to understanding what a TPA is. I have
Oh,
seen
yeah.
again and again in every place.
Yeah.
No matter how much outreach we do, no matter how much continuous work we do with our mentors, some of them who've been with us for years know what the TPA game's about. Others have no idea. So just even the idea of supporting clinical work, if you narrowed it to in the cycle
Mhm.
of ed or TP or FAST, that clinical work, what's the relationship of educative for those folks? So do we have anything there on, clinical work means cooperating teachers and mentors being onboarded somewhat. So I just make a note here.
And so, no, but that's exactly what all this is saying, is that we need that explicit language. That's exactly what it's saying.
Onboarding
Is
mentors
that we
and
have
cooperating teachers.
to parse that out and tell everybody what it needs to be.
And we see a lot of training, back to faculty on coursework. Yeah, go ahead.
I see that in the last one, more explicit language in the accreditation standards.
There it
for
is.
Student teaching, logistics, placement, mentor support, program collab.
Oh.
I would say mentor support is
Yes.
what you're talking about right now about.
Number 0.73,
73.
that sounds like me.
Well, that's also though in the improving candidate support one too.
Is
So
that in the
Yeah.
other?
that's another.
Oh, yeah, the other one, yeah.
So
Yeah, that's what I
think
thought, right.
also
That's also in
another-
there.
Like there's a whole group on.
So synergies.
That talks about the.
But because
This, I mean, this does go with our category as well. I
Right.
mean, just to speak to the fact of like, the mentors do need to
Mm.
understand the cycles of the TPA and what they're mentoring towards in each of those cycles.
And I did put, this was definitely something I said because the student teaching logistics, everything, because right now we don't specify. I mean, well, the standards don't specify, which is why it's the Wild Wild West.
I also think my experience with the Board of Institutional Review has been that the standards are intentionally broad to give as much flexibility and latitude for programs. And
That's
so
true.
when we are
That is true.
making recommendations, I think we should also be careful not to pigeonhole ourselves.
Right, for
into-
straight jacket people.
Right, and so that just something to think about
Absolutely.
as we're going through, like, I think for us, we're like, yeah, we want, a 20-page manual for mentors. I don't know, something specific,
exactly.
whatever it is, with, model examples that they have to look through but like, that's not, I think that's beyond.
Maybe some guide rails and maybe something in the process where, like you say, it's monitored to see how it's affecting candidates and to
It can be
see.
self-monitored.
Right,
They
yeah.
would monitor and report on what they're
Right.
learning.
So I think this first one, I think we can maybe tweak to capture that the program is continuously monitoring and reporting on the ways in which they're embedding the assessment and supporting mentors in the field to, I don't know.
I
Helping
think
it.
the word measured, by the way, is being used as a throwaway for a signal for meaning, look at the numbers of the results of the candidates, right, on your TPA. Look at the
Right.
profiling results. So that word measured, I think means that. Just double check. Is that what you guys thought it meant? That it was like, just look at the numbers that are coming out of the TPA results for your candidates.
Well, when I looked at 1.36, that you're talking about 1.
Yeah, just that word measure was interesting. It
Okay,
showed
so
up there.
for me, when I read it, TPA's chosen for embedded coursework and clinical work will be measured. I think this is asking about measuring the degree to which the
Oh.
you see what I'm saying?
Well, then that requires
Not the
development
actual-
of a measure to do that, which we don't have right now. So that's an interesting point. See, I'm glad you said that, because that means you need something other than what we got.
Well, yeah, we definitely do.
Yeah, right, okay, that's not obvious to you.
We definitely do.
Here's another thing that
That's how I
kind
saw
of
that
is like, shows up in all of these ones, just again and again, like a repeat. Coursework. Well, boy,
Right.
isn't that a really funny
You
thing?
know what I think,
Yeah.
you know what I think why that is? Because clinical practice, when you go into clinical practice, there are courses specifically for clinical practice.
Oh, so
And
you
so
didn't
I
mean the
think-
general foundational core of your masters or your teachers?
No,
You
I
meant
think that I
specifically
specifically tied to the clinical practice coursework.
For us, that's phase 1, phase 2, which is connected to the in-service or inside the classroom
Right,
experience.
when they're working on their
Those
TPAs.
courses.
Yeah, the
So
courses
that
where they're
might
working
be-
on their TPAs.
That's a fine because
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And when I say coursework as applied to the TPA, that's what I was thinking.
see, I was thinking more like when I was a foundations professor, I have an assessment course and I connected my assessment course
Huh,
to the elements of the actual.
interesting.
TPA. And I know a person who did that with education psychology. So they took their educational psychology class and they connected components. That's alignment, actually.
See, I was thinking
But you were
more
thinking really in the area
specific of clinical practice. with the
clarify with the
TPA.
commission, I think.
Yeah,
What they
probably.
mean in that language is by statute. Do they mean
Oh, yeah,
all
that's true.
coursework for the?
That's a good question. I
program,
honestly
or
don't
do they
know.
mean this narrower area?
Honestly, I don't know.
I'll go ask and see if I can
That's a
find
good
someone.
question.
Maybe no, it's right in here.
When you look at coursework in
Yeah.
general, right? Many programs, they have the latitude to say, okay, you're taking a methods course in math. And we're gonna be working on the component that the assignment in, one of the assignments in class is to do a TPA focused in math. So it connects what you're doing over here at 4 to 7 PM to what you're doing from 8 to 2:30, right? So that you can see that. Some programs do that. Some programs make a separate seminar. This point in the program, you're gonna do this, and this point in the program, you're gonna do that, right? And so they can connect in coursework that way. Some programs do all of their coursework in one semester and all of their
Yeah, the
clinical practice in
Another,
another
that's
semester.
true.
And so there's a seminar and it's classroom management and
Yeah, yeah.
is everybody okay, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's there is a lot of latitude based on faculty, based on philosophy, based on what the program decides to do.
So it's intentionally broad, this language.
So maybe, because the other language that's in the standards or in the accreditation cycle, it talks about the key assessments, which are the things that are supposed to be aligned. And again, the latitude on where you place those key assessments. So maybe some more specificity of language saying key assessments, because I do think that it's pretty much understood that those key assessments are related to their TPEs and TPA.
And just one other thing,
Anything.
as you were all talking about mentor support, there is a requirement for faculty or for mentors, cooperating teachers to receive 10 hours of training per year.
Yeah.
So you might be that audit that.
10 hours of what? There you
Yeah,
go.
the 10 hours
But
of
it is specified 10
10
hours.
hours of initial training,
Cooperating
and then
teachers.
some of that has to do with the
Yes.
TPA.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you would find that as not being implemented even the best of your programs. That to me,
Right.
10 hours per mentor.
But
Yeah.
the thing is, yeah, it's initial, and so you have, but the thing is it's an opportunity to put in some training for for a TPA model. And it can be a recording of a faculty member at saying, hey, here's what this person's gonna have to do, and here's what you do to help them. And it could literally be the materials and a 20-minute recording. And I know a lot of cooperating teachers that would listen to that in the car on their way to work because they know that they're gonna have to, and they want it, to me, cooperating teachers, they want what's best. They want to push out the best and they want to help these folks. They just need the tools.
And it could be a combination of both, because like for us, it's a combination of recordings like that from faculty, from our TPA coordinator, and then also in-person stuff that we do with the mentor teacher and whatnot. So it's a combo of things that keep,
So a recommendation,
That is specifically 10 hours of initial training for for cooperating teachers to have TPA.
No, not TPA, it's mentor.
It's
mentorship, yeah, general.
Like adult learning theory,
Yeah.
PPA program.
Right.
oh,
There's
I thought we were talking about TPA, we're talking about in general.
No, it's general to be a mentor.
General.
No, it's not 10 hours of TPA.
That-
That sounds terrible.
That would kill somebody.
Yeah, the standard specifies like different areas and
Right.
which they should.
But there is
hours.
to that.
But
though,
But there,
right?
yes, there
There is
is.
some type of TPA.
There is a
right?
TPA
Okay.
piece,
So
yes.
maybe we sharpen a
That,
little bit of the focus of.
I'm just, yeah, because I'm trying to understand because our program is super small. Our residency program is super small with a very small amount of cooperating teachers. And like Brent is saying, like,
We got a big program with a lot of cooperating teachers.
but, mentor training can mean a lot to various different programs.
And also, you want to make sure that you are thinking about where your program, if you're operating in a large city, a lot of what you're going to talk about in those trainings are going to look different than somewhere like Merced, where I'm from, right? We support candidates and it's a 3-hour drive up and down the valley because you may have only one school with 70 kids in a town. And we have to support folks in those spaces as opposed, some schools where they have hundreds and hundreds of kids. I worked at a school with only 300 kids for many years because it was a very rural community and that was just the context. And understanding the context is a very important part of supporting a teacher
That's
candidate,
never
especially who's
safe.
from that community themselves.
Consequences without understanding context may sound virtuous, but boy, it leads to a lot of disasters too. By the way, if people travel 3 hours in the Bay Area to go 50 miles now, so kind of like a rural traveler, just trying to get around.
No, most definitely, but.
But I like your idea about
Yes.
size too, like the
Yeah.
whole thing, geography, size.
And that leaves
Yeah.
it to the program to really know who they are working with,
Right.
who they're serving.
right,
Because they're not only serving the candidates in their program, they're serving these districts.
Right.
Because now these districts are getting to work with these candidates and move forward, so.
So I'm starting just based on what y'all are saying to transcribe some recommendations. So
Great.
yes, thank
Really
you.
I've
appreciate
got some
that.
notes to support if you need it.
the RDI TPA work group recommends that programs provide mentor teachers with information, tools, and resources for supporting candidates to successfully complete a TPA. This recommendation is necessary because in order to truly embed the assessment in clinical practice, those most familiar with the clinical context must know, the nature of the assessment, the particulars of the
Connections.
Yeah, I use that terrible corporate word onboarding,
yeah.
connections. what would you say?
Context.
Context.
Connections, contacts, and onboarding.
We can drop onboarding, this is totally corporate, forget it.
Let's circle back to that.
Yep. you got it. I mean, we spent 2025, I get stuck with those words sometimes,
Pull that for now, Brett.
yeah. exactly.
So
I'm gonna head over to
Okay, thank you.
candidate support, so let me know if you want me to.
An admin that said a lot of circle back stuff.
Yeah.
Circle back to that.
Let's circle back to that.
because about
Corporate
this,
speak.
this recommendation is necessary because in order to embed the assessment in practice, those most familiar with the clinical context must be prepared to support candidates within that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good enough rationale for now.
think
And
so.
what's the next part of the sentence scaffold?
This is the worst part for me.
Uh-oh.
Implementation of this recommendation is intended to address this by
By filling
More
the gap.
explicit, by filling the gap or more explicit, information regarding
Yeah.
the connection between
Yes.
clinical practice. And you can put whatever else you would want to
Right,
put.
implementations of the recommended is intended
Fill the gap
to
or
address this by.
providing more
Tools, resources, and
tools.
information.
Or yeah, more tools, resources,
Information, you said originally.
information. Did I say that?
You said information, I think. I
Information.
think that was our other colleague.
I could say more direction for programs in more closely aligning their clinical practice and coursework with TPA preparation.
By the way, we focused that initial take on clinical work, right? You didn't add in coursework. Do you want to write a separate one for that, or is this all
I think
one?
we should write a separate one,
Separate one?
because this one, what I was hearing, I'm hearing two things. One is that programs need to monitor the ways they're embedding the assessment in coursework and clinical practice. And then I'm also hearing a recommendation to provide mentor teachers with better information about the TPA so that they can then support the candidates in the clinical practice. Am I hearing?
I guess I mean,
You want to put those together?
I kind of lump them together, but that's just me though. Don't,
Remember, yeah.
don't.
I just need us to analytically separate them first, then we can lump them together, but they're not really the same problem. I mean, there's lots of
No.
examples. Like, for example, you raised, I'm sorry, I'm going back to thinking versus just doing.
Yeah,
Is that okay? Can I
Go
think for
for
a
it.
second?
go for it.
So when I heard you, and I thought this is really.
You have 2 minutes.
I got 1 minute, I'll cut that in half. Check it out. You said, rightly, I think, the coursework could be interpreted quite narrowly as the person who is delivering a seminar in relationship to the TPA. Let's call that the placement,
It
right?
can be,
It
yes.
can be that.
Yes.
It's not as broad as what our friend mentioned, which was methods courses. We call them foundation courses, like Ed Psych is a foundation course. So methods, math, foundation, single subject, sorry. How wide do we cast that?
Well, see, that's kind of why
Narrow.
when I was when I was listening to Marissa, I was thinking, like I said, that broad interpretation, because again, maybe we're specifically, I mean, I'm thinking specifically about, TPA and the coursework that goes with the TPA. But again, some schools have their key assessments spread throughout all of the program, whereas some kind of box everything into their 2 semesters of clinical practice.
Right.
So I was trying to account for that. So the only way I can think of is to say key assessments, because I do know from the accreditation process that the key assessments are supposed to be aligned with the TPA. So,
So, and
I
it's,
mean, I don't know if that
key
makes sense.
assessments isn't even in here.
They are?
well,
The TPA or the
they're
fees?
TPEs, but the TPEs are the TPA or TPA, the TPEs.
Supposedly.
Well, okay.
So just
I'm
looking
just-
at this 1.3.
No, I just didn't
You know
know if
what I
the
mean?
language says has
Right.
to be aligned with the TPA or if it.
TPE. You know what, honestly, I think the key assessments, ooh, you know what, I don't know. Maybe it does say TPEs and not TPA. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that makes
Honestly, I'm not
We're
positive.
all aligned with TPs everywhere in our program.
Yeah, we are
And then
too.
TPA is like sort of should be aligned as well,
Well,
obviously.
obviously, yeah. But,
Other TPs, right? But so
But
just,
anyway.
here's my thing. Do we have to stick to the language of this?
Yeah.
Do we have to stick to the language of this document? Don't,
we can
no?
add what we need to add, right? To make it make sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, consolidate the
Consolidate.
spirit of it.
Yeah,
I do
exactly.
think we need to stick with the spirit of it, but we
Right,
don't have to stick with the
absolutely.
language of it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like our big idea here is, I just take it strands. Clinical work will be measured, reported, monitored, and expected outcomes are going to be set. There's some kind of like logic model theory of action. You're going to do this, this, and this, and we want that to happen, because if it doesn't happen, you're going to have a tough time figuring out where your gaps are. But again, what's the gap? The gap is how you embed your TPA assessments, tasks, frames, whatever those things are, whatever they happen to be. So, all right, let's read again and see what you got.
You said though, I mean, but the question was, should we separate the two? And I say we can. I don't see why not. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think
I'd
it's
say we
two
can.
recommendations.
Yeah, we can
that-
totally do that.
So clinical, what are we reading right now? What did it say?
Or what did we say?
Yeah, what'd you
We
go?
haven't said anything, but I've kind of jotted down just to brainstorm. Program and or common standards direct programs to monitor and report on the ways they are embedding the assessment in both clinical, coursework and clinical practice. And then I skipped this recommendation is necessary because, but I went on to say implementation of this recommendation is intended to address this by requiring programs to create formative opportunities in multiple places in the program, or like something
Yeah.
like that, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the key assessments idea that
Right.
those,
Right, the key assessment idea is it is supposed to be formative, that's absolutely correct.
yeah.
So if I get it right, you've taken the word measured out from 1.36, you've added the word monitored, which we discussed, and then so we got reported and monitored. That's the accountability mechanism, basically, report and monitor.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll assume that you will be setting your own expected outcomes. In other words, because that's another component, like having them actually come forward and say, we expect this is an outcome, not just that we monitored our process. I would fight for expected outcome, which I think was our colleague's actual suggestion here before she left. So I guess what I'm wondering is what made the minimal would be, I think, reported and monitored, done. That's easy, straightforward. We don't need to add more, but you could also consider like having them push a little further.
So I think that could be a part for like the implementation of this recommendation is intended to address this by requiring programs to create key formative assessments and set expected program outcomes.
That's a nice way. That's a nice way to bring that back.
Good.
We still need it's necessary because I'd say it's necessary because for a couple reasons. One is like there's a connection between formative and embedded. If it's embedded throughout, there's like multiple opportunities for
To provide feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So this recommendation is necessary.
To ensure feedback opportunities are available in multiple parts of the cycle, process, whatever.
To be candidate, maybe how about throughout a candidate's development
Yeah.
program?
Yeah.
Leave it that general?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna parallel that with the coursework claim, just use the same rationale. Just substitute the word.
Well, I said this one, program and or common standards direct programs to monitor and report on the ways in which they are embedding the assessment in both coursework and clinical practice.
So you put it back to one recommendation, two different contexts.
The separate recommendation for clinical
Oh.
practice was about providing mentors.
Mentors.
Okay.
With
Their-
information.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wish there's a way to project this up here so everybody can see it. I can share it as a Google Doc.
That's fine. I don't
It's okay. I don't have my dog.
Helps. Sometimes I have a hard time listening and not reading stuff. So.
You'd have to get into the Zoom.
Maybe I
Yeah.
can do that.
So by the way, the rewrite number one at the top, rewrite the program standards to explicitly direct programs to embed TPA during the program. Is that kind of in line with what we're recommending?
Yes.
I think
Well,
we combined those two.
Combined them.
Combine them?
Yeah, we
Okay.
combined
Which
them.
one?
1.36 and 1.23. But the
I was
combination,
reading 1.0, fourth one down.
1.09.
That's what we did A, B, C, D last time. So I was reading the fourth one down. Yeah, the rewrite the program standards to explicitly direct
Oh,
programs to
yeah.
embed
Yeah.
TPA. That's what I was.
They're all kind
I
of
think that's connected.
It's all kind of connected, and I think what she's saying, at least if I remember correctly, is exactly, that the standard needs to provide that guidance. But she said it in a different way, which is fine.
What is standard? Was standard 5?
Right.
I don't think we specified which standard, I think we just said
From
the
the
process.
Says
So I was
5B.
reading the
5A.
recommendation mentions this standard 5, and then I see 5A and then 5B down at the bottom.
Because that's where it is
Okay.
right now, that's where it's housed right now.
The reason I didn't say which standard is because there's program standard 5 is about the TPA, but
Yeah.
there's, I think it's
Common
common
standard
standard 3 or
three, yeah.
4 is about,
Program improvement.
yeah, program improvement. And so it's about using, like, that's the monitoring piece, is like, programs should be responsible for continually looking at how they're embedding it and seeing if this is actually working.
And I think, I like that you didn't put the standard number associated with it, because that keeps it less restrictive, because if we relegate it to one of the standards, that restricts it,
Uh-huh.
I think.
Do I find the dang?
So,
Ziply?
I want to use my other minute if I can, speaker. Got my other minute? I only took, I counted 35 seconds on the last one.
I will allow it.
And how are we doing for time? We got 19 minutes. Are we pretty close?
Send a link to the agenda
Are we pretty close to
in his email.
note taker and art?
Sorry, but I'm trying to get on the Zoom link so we can all see the. Oh, right there. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just scrolled past that. I was like,
When
that's
you
what
make-
time
when
it
you Make
is.
it a date.
Yeah,
You think, okay, I'll make
Okay.
my calendar invite.
cool. Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
I went through the same thing in there. I scrolled past it. It's like, yeah.
Okay, so now we're in there. Now I can share my screen. Okay. Is this helpful to see it up on screen?
Yes. So, folks who are listening in can also see that.
Mhm.
So, I'll take this pause to say, again, what maybe others don't want to say. I appreciate committee work. I think it's great. I love the fact that we know how to generate ideas and perhaps even good recommendations. I'm really worried about the theory of action behind a lot of this. So the idea is that somebody in the building who runs these programs, who's been appointed to run these programs, particularly for TPA, is going to take this information and be responsible for compliance. They're going to take the recommendation and they're going to say, okay, they're asking us to ensure that we have a reporting mechanism, monitoring, and perhaps even some way of talking about improvement. And they're going to have to come before committee of some kind or a work group. I've been in those work groups. We have one at San Jose State. And then they're going to make more recommendations. But who owns this recommendation inside of these programs that we're guiding and advising?
That's gonna be, I guess, on an institutional level,
Yeah.
it depends upon how you are structured.
Yeah.
For SC, it's, it's kind of a committee thing,
Mm.
with usually like myself, a data statistician person, faculty members, we have a pretty collaborative.
Faculty,
Environment.
so I'm a faculty member and
Yeah.
I've sat in a few of these over the years where there's somebody who shows us some data.
But that's not what we do. I mean, in this, I guess what we would look at, or you would, number one, the first step is gonna be that committee
Yeah.
is gonna decide what you need to look at and how you need to do it to function correctly.
So based on
In
the
a real,
recommendations they get,
perfect world,
they're gonna look at those and say, okay, we got a charge to work on
So
some.
how do we do this? How does our program do this? And what part do we all play? How do we do it? I mean,
And getting curriculum change is not just top down, you do that. It doesn't work that way in the real world.
No.
So it isn't, you tell somebody, you don't have enough TPA tasks embedded in your courses, do it. Unless you control a lecturer pool that you can hire and fire on that basis, which is a scary concept. You have to always build collaboration time. You have to build consensus. You have to get some sort of project. And one of the things I worry about is this is a lot of unfunded mandate stuff. This is that classic telling people to do something, but not worrying about how they are going to get to it.
but see, I'm not so sure that we're talking about new content. I think we're talking about a different way to view things and a different way to hold ourselves accountable for them. I mean, it's gonna vary, obviously. I can't speak for every program, right?
Yeah.
But what I would think is with some of this guidance, that programs would use some of the things that they have in existence, because, I mean, everybody's not in a vacuum. People are doing something. It's just not being operationalized correctly, as far as we can tell. But if we give them some more direction to say, hey, monitor this or figure out a way to do this in a more
Communicate.
and communicate
Yeah.
and, figure out how to truly make it more formative within the confines of your program.
See, there it's like,
Because we're not going
Yeah.
to tell them exactly how. We can't tell them that. We just say, hey, what's
Yeah.
going to be your mechanism, or maybe give some ideas, some examples possibly.
I appreciate that. I think, again, it's to me just not possible just to go write stuff and go home. Like, it's like that looks good for us and we did our job, but that isn't actually.
You can't do that with anything though.
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, they
You
can't do
gotta think, you
anything.
gotta think about it in any evaluation of anything, the design of the stakeholder. Who's the stakeholders? There are a lot of stakeholders in this world, and one of them are campuses, programs
Yeah.
who have multiple folks to work with, who don't have time to sit in one room, who aren't necessarily going to be amenable to all the same claims and demands. So you have to figure out what are the things that they can do
But-
that they're already doing,
Okay, but that's what they're going to talk about in the confines of their program.
right?
That's what they need to figure out. They need to do
You
that.
just give them the direction and give them a way to know where the North Star is, find it.
Yeah, and a little bit of an example if you can, or something.
Maybe.
But again, but yeah, I mean, but again, it's.
Be another recommendation.
Exactly. See, that's why I'm pushing us to come up with more recommendations. Yeah.
Well, another recommendation
Examples.
that we could make would
Yeah.
be that the commission creates a
Best practices,
a model, right? Some sort of like,
Interinstitutional conference collaboration so we can meet each other and actually figure out what we're all doing.
It's a great idea.
Thank you. Who said that? Thank
Oh, I
you.
talked about what we did. Yeah, we did that.
So there again, you got it. You got some ideas.
Because there are some that
I mean,
exist.
that feels, to me, that feels a little bit beyond the purview of the commission to do that. Like, I think that just like you said,
Yeah.
when you're top downing it, it's not as good as when it's generative. So like
Yeah.
we have like the CSU UC Collaborative on Neurodiversity that was
Right.
very generative from like a group of CSU UC faculty who are like, hey, we got to figure out across.
But to get funders to fund that, you often needed the direction of state policymakers to say this is important, therefore you go make the pitch. So my point is, how do we get the money to do the work if we don't say these are the recommendations
Oh,
necessary?
Well, what I'm gonna say, Brent, is that within the confines of what this work group is charged with doing, we gotta get ourselves moving down the runway, as it were.
Well, we got the runway, but do we have some tarmac that'll catch anything?
Well, we might. I think we might. It just, again.
So you don't want to say things like resources and recommendations that.
I shy away from giving, I shy away from telling them exactly how to do it. Because, like you say, everybody's got different resources, everybody's got different political configurations and ramifications. So what I tell one institution, or what we could tell one institution, may not work for another.
We could, one thing we could do is make a recommendation that model sponsors be responsible for that. I don't think it's within the role of the CTC. But for instance, Scale, when they first initiated EdTPA, was doing conferences to bring institutions together to talk about best practices.
So it was PAC before Scale.
Right, exactly.
So we all know, and a lot of us around this room know PAC before Scale, and the point is, but it still required saying what you just said and making a recommendation that best practices to be implemented are going to require supports for institutions. I don't think we should at all be hiding away from those facts. That's like saying, I'm going to once again give you an unfunded mandate. I'm going to set No Child Left Behind in front of you. I'm going to tell you got to do X. You figure it out. That to me is so irresponsible in 2024. We should be not telling people what to do and which programs to fund, but setting the
Guide rails.
recommendation, the guide rails, the networks.
Well, that's what this is.
Scale
right?
example. So I'm going with you on that. I think we just need to put it in there in a way that says,
There that says maybe we suggest a best practices.
yeah, what model sponsors, best practices, and a
Whatever you wanna call it.
conferencing that allows us to network and learn from each other.
Yeah,
But
I
they
was just-
include that it needs to be funded.
I didn't even say that part. I just said this, I put out another, a request. We could say that. Which,
Just brainstorm.
Who's gonna fund it?
Just putting it in there, I mean, his recommendation is brainstorm. They
Yeah,
can
it's a
take it or
brainstorm,
take
right?
it Or leave it,
Yeah.
but if you know the reality is, it has to recommend it and the proper supports,
Hey, here comes the
which
teacher.
could include funding. That happens all the time. They tell us to do stuff, and I'm like, you ain't giving us no.
that's like an appropriations bill. I mean, we go back to, that's just,
Lowering budgets. Taking away supports, lowering budgets and say, what do you want?
give me more.
So I want to, this is a little bit related, but I want to go back to the recommendation about the mentors because brought up PACT. Mentors knew PACT well because we invited them to score with us. And this came up this meeting or the meeting before where we were talking about local scoring as, and I think that that's a different, and it's a different focus area, but I do see that related local scoring, when we look at the FAST model, it's completely embedded in their program because it's locally scored. And
They
so
all own it because they all have to score it.
exactly. And so I don't know, like our task here is on improved
But
direction.
you did make connections to other things. You hit on gold. We have to put that in. You can't leave that like separate, like siloed. That is exactly part of a recommendation for improving mentor, clinical and coursework. I mean, you gotta have that link. So
So,
thank you for saying it. How do we
so
write it?
recommends an element of local scoring
Even
to,
just auditing, like a sample, once every year, we do a little bit of scoring
Right.
together. We don't do it all the scoring, but we do a little bit to look at how people are doing. It's old fashioned portfolio work. You put in front of a group of teachers, here's a student example of an essay. It's information, it's first draft. What do you all think? What would you do to support this person? Brainstorm it.
Yeah.
You should have people looking at these TPAs. Here's an example of some video. Here's some work this student's doing. What do you think?
I'm smiling about that because I just sent out an all call to the grads for their stuff, because that's exactly what we're doing is looking at rubrics and looking at past TPAs and figuring out what made them pass.
Scaling that up and making sure everyone has the resources, meaning network, as you as a mentor. We haven't even mentioned like mentor of mentor programs. Like, why don't we have, this is the idea of the collaborative. Why don't we have people like reaching out to each other's institutions and helping them out? It's amazing how siloed this all is because we're competing for the same people. Is that why? You know, like, why aren't we reaching out to somebody in Fresno and the Bay Area and vice versa?
That's what, I mean, that's what makes sense to me, because that's what we did. With our math.
San Francisco.
But it's not,
Makes sense too, as a classroom teacher too, like you
feel like,
have professional learning communities around, you know,
for some reason, I
what's
feel
the
like.
target, what's the goal.
Now, this
in
one,
another area.
Thank you.
Might have been.
Like, what's good for the goose might be good for the gander.
to me, is also part of D, the improving communication across segments and with the field.
With that language,
That's
that's the
the,
rationale, isn't
that's
it?
the next one. That's the next. Bob.
Did we get all this, I mean, do
To
we,
improve.
I mean, all of this?
More or less.
1.191, 8.82, 7.73 is all that,
Well,
pretty much included in these recommendations that we're already
Well-
talking about.
I don't know if we had to include all those so much as we had to synthesize what we
Yeah.
Yeah.
thought
Well,
the
that's what I meant to
impetus
say.
was, you know.
Yeah.
But
And I like that we extended and connected in this conversation because.
But there's nothing that is in here that was left unaddressed, so what I'm
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
So I think if we can connect that thing to the, did you get some of that language in there? You had that beautiful like connection you made to
I don't know, you can do.
All right, let me see.
But I,
scoring, yeah, okay.
I don't know if the student teaching logistics.
Yes, you,
I think that is, I mean,
Okay.
she didn't put it in there specifically, but I think it's kind of implied.
The
Well,
exemplars and opportunities for cross,
fertilization, is that the wrong word now?
no, what is cross institution? Is that what you're saying?
Institute.
I don't wanna make
yeah.
universities-
Cross-institutional networking?
Institutions.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
we just share the Google Doc.
I'm already in.
Cross-institutional networking?
The sentences, it looks thicker there. I'm trying to have it.
Or is that networking word?
Like, my
That's right, you're in San Francisco, my friend.
Let's do that.
I forgot what
Let's circle back.
The next one says that improve communication with segments and with the field.
I gotta teach my family that dangerous word, that concept. Circle back to that.
Yeah, I just like, I like
good.
learning and collaboration because, you know, like I mean, that's what we're charging teachers to do. I mean, why, we should
Thank
be,
you.
we should be
Professional
modeling.
learning community, you said PLCs.
It just-
PLCs for this.
Just like somebody called for the TPA, the UDL to be modeled in the TPA, we should be modeling that process of like looking at your, I don't know, like your processes, whatever you just said, the process is something. And learning from each other around what.
Well,
makes
wouldn't you
it-
want to look at the feedback processes, cycles and protocols? What are y'all doing there? What's going on? What's working for you? What is not working for you?
What we don't want, well, what I don't want to happen is just for universities to just look at information and say, well, that was fun, let's do this again next year. And not have like goals or, you know, that it's just all on the teacher, that the teacher holds like, I either passed this thing or I didn't pass this thing and now I have to take it again.
Yeah.
But there should be, you know, there should be learning that happens with the teacher, with the universities,
Right.
Everything should be about learning. Like, what are we doing in this process if we're not? getting
Well,
something
that's
out of
how
it?
I think it was sold back in the day, literally 20 years ago and 20.
3 minutes.
Okay, my friend, sorry, I used
You have
my
1 minute.
3 seconds,
Yeah.
2
You
minutes.
got 50 seconds.
No, that was to the group. You didn't see me. No, I was saying we have, I'm gonna come in 3 minutes.
We good?
Yes, to email.
Adam came to the door already.
Yeah.
It was, he was reading through the window.
That's good.
Well, this looks pretty good. Did we do our
I
work?
think
Thank
it's
you.
good. Thank you.
Scribes and synthesizers and thinkers.
Whew.
This group is
I'm having a
intense.
hard time with this last
Oh.
I'm
line.
so glad I wasn't here to do this all alone.
Oh.
Takes a village. I heard. Oh, that was his thing, is he's talking about doing things alone. All right, last line. We're looking for help on implementation of this recommendation is intended to
Freaking
Address
address this by building capacity for systems of continuous improvement among HEIs or
IHEs.
IHEs. Okay, so go ahead. There you got a sentence. I helped out a little bit.
Is learning in part of improvement, or can we also?
I just want to get that skeleton sentence down and then I think we can wordsmith the heck out of it then.
I'll just say institutions because it's not just
Yeah.
IHEs.
Okay. Okay. So what was, you said in learning, can we throw learning in there?
And learning.
Yes.
Say again, Elise.
After improvement, just advocating for.
And continuous learning or improvement and learning. Yes, continuous improvement and learning.
Yeah.
Did we get it? You happy with that sentence?
Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, because they're providing a lot of party goods. You got water today. I was happy about that. Today's discussion, I'm glad I threw that out there and upset some people. That was good.
I mean,
We need to think.
for sure.
I felt like we were getting corralled. Like suddenly, next thing I know, it's about accreditation. I thought it was all about TPA, but they're connected. They're connected.
It's so, yes,
Part of the work.
charge.
I didn't read carefully. I should have said, oh, I don't know anything about that. I shouldn't be a part of this. You know, this is about that heavy stuff called accreditation. Wow.
It's,
Well, that's
It's
what it
about the
seems like at the
system.
beginning, but yes, once you saw all of the focus areas,
System components, yeah, focus areas.
then you realize it
Warriors
was
and
more.
Pistons tomorrow.
Oh, yeah?
Not doing so hot. Warriors anyway.
Your
Kings are
home.
doing real great though.
Who?
Kings are doing good. Doing well, excuse me.
You-
Teachers.
You know what? I do that with adults all the time. I learned it from somebody from Europe who taught me the right way to say well versus. That's an ELA thing now?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Versus well. Yeah.
Well, you can speak in code depending on your context, right? I mean, you can. That's the problem. We're always code switching. You could just say it that way and. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that was a really good, great discussion.
Well, I think it surfaced a lot of our our own commitments is how data is used.
Yeah.
That's important for us to talk about publicly to each other.